Welcome to the debate. Imagine sitting down at a monitor at, say 6 o'clock in the morning. Out there in the dark, you have 300 vehicles scattered across a massive geographic map.
Millions of dollars in heavy assets just sitting there.
Right, millions. And you have exactly 2 minutes to look at a unified digital dashboard before the phone starts ringing and, the chaos of the day basically begins. The central question we're looking at today is, what is the absolute first, most vital piece of data you look at?
It really is the ultimate psychological bottleneck in modern logistics. You have this massive synthesis of information, telematics, maintenance logs, financial schedules, all feeding into just one screen.
Exactly. And that 2-minute window forces a fundamental philosophical choice. And, representing the operational reality side of things, if I'm sitting in that manager's chair, my absolute priority has to be operational readiness. I am looking at fleet availability and critical alerts.
And I'll be taking the other side, looking at strategic efficiency. Because I'd argue that metrics like fuel consumption and cost per kilometer are the true drivers.
Which makes sense on paper, but a fleet is a physical entity, right? Ensuring that those trucks can legally and mechanically roll out the gate, that's the prerequisite for literally everything else.
I see the appeal of that, I really do. But I think you're kind of confusing baseline survival with actual fleet management. Simply keeping trucks physically moving it's just basic dispatching.
Basic dispatching?
Yeah, true piloting of a fleet requires understanding the structural economics of every single mile before a tire ever even hits the pavement.
Let's unpack the mechanics of that physical reality, though, because a fleet is not... It's not a theoretical financial instrument on a spreadsheet. It is an operation governed by physics, wear and tear, and time.
Sure.
When that dashboard boots up, the first key performance indicator, fleet availability, is staring you in the face for a very profound reason. If you have a fleet of 300 vehicles, but only 250 of them can physically start their engines and roll out this morning.
You only have a 250 vehicle fleet.
You have a 250 vehicle fleet, exactly.
True, but you are still carrying the financial burden, the insurance, the amortization, the parking footprint for all 300 of those trucks.
You definitely are. But my point is about the immediate operational bleeding. Every single immobilized vehicle represents a cascading failure in the physical world. Let me explain how that actually plays out on the ground.
Okay, go ahead.
If a vehicle goes down, you don't just lose that one truck's capacity. You trigger essentially a blood clot in the cardiovascular system of your supply chain.
It's highly disruptive, I agree.
Right, because to cover the lost route, your dispatch team has to cannibalize other routes. They force the healthy trucks to take on heavier payloads and drive extra miles, which ironically accelerates the wear and tear on your remaining assets.
Yeah, the domino effect.
Exactly. Or worse, you are forced onto the spot market to secure exorbitant daily rentals just to avoid defaulting on your delivery contracts.
Which obviously hurts the bottom line.
It destroys margins instantly. That is why a healthy fleet has to target an availability rate of greater than 95%. And to maintain that, a manager has to use those first, precious seconds to look at critical alerts.
But is that really the best use of...
We are talking about triage here, an overdue safety inspection, like a DOT check in the States or an MOT in Europe, an expired insurance policy, a deeply degraded battery. If you do not resolve an expired insurance alert today, that vehicle legally cannot move. Triage has to be the paramount focus.
I come at it from a totally different way, though. I certainly don't deny that a truck needs valid insurance or, working brakes to operate. But what you were describing is essentially administration and reactive firefighting.
I'd call it keeping the business alive.
But if your definition of a successful morning is simply, we are legally allowed to drive and the engines turn over, you are missing the massive, silent inefficiencies bleeding your operation dry. I look immediately at cost per kilometer and fuel consumption because they dictate your actual viability.
Fuel is a major factor, sure.
Look at the industry data. For commercial transport, fuel alone routinely represents up to 40% of total operating costs.
It is a massive vulnerability, certainly.
It's the defining slice of the pie, and because it is so massive, A stealthy, creeping 5% increase in fuel consumption across a fleet can vaporize hundreds of thousands of dollars annually without a single alert ever going off.
Which is scary. Yeah.
That is the danger of your dashboard philosophy. True piloting means aggregating fuel, maintenance, tire degradation, insurance, and amortization to make structural decisions. It's not just asking, can this truck move today? It's asking, is moving this specific truck today actually generating a profit, or is it operating at a loss?
I see why you think that, but let me give you a slightly different perspective on what constitutes an actual immediate crisis in logistics. Let's look at those immobilized vehicles again.
Okay.
The raw number of broken down trucks isn't enough information. You need context, and that context is highly complex. Why is the truck down? Which specific workshop bay is it sitting in? What exact part is caught in supply chain limbo?
Right.
Has it been stuck waiting for a simple authorization for 2 days, or has it been waiting on a transmission rebuild for 3 weeks?
And knowing all of that gets the truck moving faster?
It allows you to unblock the physical bottleneck. You have to clear the blood clot before you put the patient on a diet.
Uh-huh.
You can talk about the long-term structural economics all you want, but if your physical assets are paralyzed in the shop because someone missed an approval email, none of your strategic metrics matter. You are failing your basic service mandate today.
That's a compelling argument, honestly. But have you considered that treating immobilized vehicles as an isolated daily crisis actually proves my point?
Wait, how does that prove your point?
Because if your operation is constantly battling sudden breakdowns, your problem isn't your morning triage technique. Your problem is that you are reacting to failures instead of predicting them. You're treating a blown engine or destroyed transmission as an act of God that just, happens overnight.
Breakdowns are a mechanical reality. Heavy machinery vibrating down a highway at 60 miles an hour for 10 hours a day will eventually experience part failure. You can't avoid physics.
They fail, yes, but they almost never fail without warning. And this is exactly why tracking fuel consumption is not just a financial accounting exercise. It is the ultimate operational radar system.
Radar system?
Yes, you view fuel metrics as a way to save money at the pump. I view fuel metrics as an early warning detection system for the exact immobilizations you are so terrified of.
Okay, walk me through the mechanics of that. Walk me through a fuel metric predicting a breakdown.
Absolutely. Think about the physics of a commercial diesel engine and the drivetrain. Let's say a truck develops a dragging brake caliper, or the diesel particulate filter, the DPF, starts to clog, or even a single fuel injector begins to misfire.
Okay, standard wear issues.
Right. But none of those issues will trigger an immediate dashboard alert telling you the truck is broken. The truck will still start. It will still drive. It will easily pass your morning availability test.
But it's working harder to do it.
Exactly. Because of the friction from that dragging brake, the engine has to work 4 to 6% harder just to maintain highway speeds. It is injecting more diesel into the cylinders to overcome that mechanical resistance.
I see where you're going with this.
Right, so if you are watching your fuel anomaly dashboard in those first 2 minutes, you will see a subtle 6% spike in consumption for that specific vehicle compared to its identical peers on the same route. That curve on your screen is your early warning.
And you act on that subtle curve before the part fails completely.
Precisely. If you prioritize that strategic data, you pull the truck into the shop on a Sunday for a cheap, controlled preventative maintenance session. You swap the brake caliper.
Okay.
But if you ignore the field data to just fight the obvious fires, the expired insurance policies and dead batteries, that same truck keeps running hot, the friction destroys the rotor, the wheel bearing overheats, and the tire blows out on a crowded interstate on a Tuesday afternoon.
Yeah, that's a nightmare scenario.
Now you have a catastrophic failure, a towing bill, missed deliveries, and a 3-week immobilization. The strategic metric prevents the operational crisis.
That is a really interesting point, though I would frame the reality of a manager's morning very differently. I don't disagree that fuel anomalies indicate mechanical wear. I mean, the physics of that are completely sound. But we have to return to the psychological reality of the 2-minute window and cognitive load.
Cognitive load?
Yes. A unified dashboard is brilliant because it synthesizes millions of data points, but the human brain still has to process that information sequentially.
But the software automatically prioritizes the information. That's the whole point of a unified dashboard.
It prioritizes it, yes, but operations managers suffer from immense decision fatigue and task-switching penalties. At 6 a.m., the brain needs clear hierarchical prioritization of immediate existential physical threats to the day's operations.
I'm not sure I follow.
Well, if you present a manager with a subtle 6% deviation in fuel efficiency on truck 42 alongside a glaring red alert that truck 18 has a tire degradation issue that makes it actively dangerous to drive, the brain must choose the immediate physical threat.
I'm not saying you ignore the bald tire. Obviously, you handle the safety issue.
What you are suggesting they split their focus in a tiny window of time. If you miss that administrative document expiring today or that critical tire alert, the fleet legally and physically grinds to a halt. The triage of critical alerts is the only logical, responsible use of those 120 seconds. You secure the perimeter of the day first.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that.
Why not?
Let me tell you why. The assumption baked into your argument is that reacting to red alerts is the highest, most sophisticated use of a highly paid manager's cognitive bandwidth. But what is an alert, fundamentally?
It's a critical notification.
It is the system telling you that you are already behind. It is entirely reactive. If you are spending your 2 minutes of deep focus acting as a glorified alarm clock for expired DOT checks, you are not managing a fleet. The fleet is managing you.
I would argue that ignoring the alarm clock means you sleep through the meeting. You fail compliance.
But a properly configured administrative software system should be handling renewals and compliance months in advance. The administrative staff should be managing that, not the fleet director at 6 a.m.
In a perfect world. Maybe.
Even in the real world, the highest value of that 2-minute window, that moment of quiet before the phones ring, is transforming data into proactive structural decisions. Piloting means stepping back from the noise of the alarms and asking the fundamental questions. Where are our maintenance costs actually increasing today compared to yesterday? Which assets are quietly becoming liabilities?
I'm just not convinced by that line of reasoning because it drastically overestimates the daily actionability of strategic data. Let's look really closely at cost per kilometer.
Gladly.
This metric aggregates fuel, maintenance, tires, insurance, amortization schedules, and various overhead expenses into a single figure. It is an incredibly dense, lagging indicator.
It's comprehensive.
It is used to answer macro-level questions. Should we keep this vehicle class? Should we replace this manufacturer? Should we restructure a regional assignment?
Yes, those are the exact decisions that dictate whether a logistics company survives or goes bankrupt.
They dictate the long-term survival, absolutely, but are you seriously suggesting that a fleet manager sits down at 6:05 a.m. on a Wednesday, looks at the amortization schedule combined with tire wear on a specific truck, and makes a spontaneous decision to sell a vehicle before their first cup of coffee?
Well, no, not sell it right then and there.
Exactly. Cost per kilometer is a quarterly review metric. It is a monthly strategy discussion metric. It is absolutely vital to the business, I concede that. But it is entirely the wrong tool for morning firefighting. You cannot dynamically replace a depreciated, inefficient asset on a Tuesday morning.
No, but
What you can do on a Tuesday morning is dispatch a backup truck because the primary one has a critical engine alert.
you are artificially limiting what cost per kilometer can do by viewing it purely as an asset acquisition or disposal metric.
Okay, how else would you use it at 6 a.m.?
Industry data proves time and again that two identical vehicles rolling off the exact same assembly line will have totally different costs per kilometer within 2 years of operation.
Due to driver behavior and route topography, usually?
Exactly. And that isn't just a fun fact for a quarterly boardroom review. That is a highly actionable daily dispatching tool.
How so? Walk me through the mechanics of applying a macro metric to a micro decision on a daily basis.
All right, let's say you have two box trucks, same make, same model, same year. Because of the way they have been driven, or perhaps slight variances in their maintenance history. Maybe truck B had a transmission rebuild that left a slight mechanical drag, or it's running on retread tires that offer more rolling resistance.
Okay, realistic variables.
Because of these micro frictions, truck A costs you $1.10 per kilometer to operate. Truck B costs you $1.25 per kilometer to operate.
A difference of 15 cents. I mean, in the grand scheme of a massive logistics operation, that sounds like a rounding error.
It sounds like a rounding error until you multiply it by the realities of the physical routes. It is 6 a.m. You have 2 routes to assign today. One route is an intercity long haul of 800 kilometers. The other is a local multi-stop urban delivery route of only 150 kilometers.
Right.
If you are only looking at your precious availability metric, you see 2 available functioning trucks. You hand the keys to the drivers at random. They both roll out the gate. Your availability is 100%. You feel like a hero.
Because the mission is accomplished, the clients will receive their goods on time, which protects the company's reputation and fulfills the contract.
Yes, but because you ignored the cost per kilometer data, you might have accidentally assigned truck B, the expensive one, to the 800-kilometer route.
Ah, I see what you're saying.
That 15-cent difference just cost you $120 on a single route on a single day. Multiply that lack of optimization across 300 trucks every day of the week, and you are bleeding tens of thousands of dollars out of your margin unnecessarily.
That is a stark way to look at it.
If you use cost per kilometer as a daily dispatching tool, you actively assign the most cost-efficient vehicle to the longest route and keep the less efficient vehicle on the short route. You don't have to wait for an annual review to realize you are bleeding cash. You stop the bleeding at 6:05 a.m. by modifying the daily assignment. That transforms lagging data into an immediate, proactive decision.
That is a remarkably precise application of the metric. And mathematically, I admit, it makes perfect sense. But I would counter that you're describing an optimized, friction-free scenario that assumes the physical reality on the ground is perfectly stable.
Well, logistics is never perfectly stable.
Exactly my point. Your scenario assumes both truck A and truck B actually start when the drivers turn the key. It assumes neither driver called in sick at 5:45 a.m. It assumes the warehouse loaded the cargo on time.
Fair enough. There are always variables.
My position is that fleet management is an inherently entropic environment. Things naturally, relentlessly degrade into chaos the moment humans and machinery interact. The availability metric, the immobilized vehicle tracking, the critical alerts, these are the essential guardrails against that chaos. You are trying to play three-dimensional chess with route optimization while the board itself is catching on fire.
But doesn't a centralized software system fundamentally change your relationship to that chaos? In the past, a manager had to dig through spreadsheets to find out what was on fire. Now, all that diagnostic information flows up automatically.
Yes, the visibility is much better.
The algorithms have already done the triage. Since the software highlights the immediate physical threats, the human's job, the whole reason they are paid to manage the operation, is to do the complex synthesis, the strategic evaluation.
It changes the relationship to the data, yes, but it doesn't change the fundamental hierarchy of operational needs. A fleet is a service provider. Whether it is delivering pharmaceuticals, transporting heavy construction materials, or moving passengers, its primary, non-negotiable mandate is to complete its physical missions safely and on time.
Right.
If you do not strictly maintain that high availability rate, and if you aren't ruthlessly managing the critical safety alerts and the workshop bottlenecks, your strategic metrics become purely academic.
Because the work isn't getting done.
Exactly. It doesn't matter how perfectly you calculated your fuel anomalies or optimized your route assignments if the truck is impounded because you missed an administrative alert. It doesn't matter how brilliantly you manage the cost per kilometer if you only have 70% of your fleet available and you were losing major client contracts because of poor service quality.
And I would maintain that viewing a fleet strictly through the lens of daily availability traps the manager in an endless, exhausting cycle of reactive firefighting.
Exhausting, yes, but necessary.
If your only metric for success is, did the trucks leave the yard today, you will slowly go bankrupt while boasting about your perfect daily dispatch record.
That's a fair warning. True fleet piloting relies on looking beneath the surface of the immediate physical machinery. It requires understanding the physics of those fuel anomalies to predict the mechanical failures long before a truck ever ends up on a hook. It requires understanding the granular cost per kilometer, all those micro frictions and inefficiencies, to make the vital routing and asset decisions that protect the bottom line.
To ensure longevity.
Exactly. The physical urgency of today cannot blind you to the financial reality of tomorrow, because without deep financial viability, there is no fleet left to dispatch next year.
It is a remarkable tension, isn't it? What we are really unpacking here is the core challenge of any massive operational leadership role.
Finding the balance?
Right. Balancing the physical, unyielding urgency of today's immediate operations with the complex financial realities of long-term efficiency. The fact that sophisticated systems now exist to bring all of these key performance indicators into a single unified space proves that these two perspectives are deeply, inextricably intertwined.
They really are.
You simply cannot have sustainable physical availability without rigorous financial discipline. And conversely, the most brilliant financial metrics are utterly useless if the wheels aren't turning and the cargo isn't moving.
There are two sides of the exact same coin. You have to manage the physical reality to enable the financial strategy, and you have to understand the financial strategy to sustain the physical reality.
Which leaves us right back where we started. Imagine the glow of that monitor at 6 o'clock tomorrow morning. The dashboard boots up. The real-time data from hundreds of heavy vehicles floods the screen. Knowing the immediate physical risks of availability and the hidden financial traps of inefficiency, which data point will you look at first?